Hey, this is Leo for Actualized.org, and in this video I'm going to talk about good versus evil. Okay, good versus evil, the classic battle, right? Okay, well, let's dig into this and talk about what good and evil actually are. This is going to be more of a philosophical video, not going to be as immediately practical and applicable as some of my others, but actually at the end I'm going to go in and tell you why this is an important concept for you to understand it properly. And the problem that I see is that most people don't really understand what good and evil are and how they actually operate and what's really going on in reality. And so because of this, it can lead to a lot of dysfunction. It creates an adversarial relationship with reality, which leads to closed-mindedness and does not get you the kind of results that you want in your life, and it keeps you from being happy. So it is practical. You just have to bear with me to see how it all interconnects. Here it's going to be a little bit more philosophical. So good versus evil, why is this topic even interesting to us? Well, all of us have heard of good and evil. Many of us tend to believe that good and evil are out there somewhere. And, we ask ourselves questions such as, why do evil things happen to good people? Or questions like, why does evil sometimes prevail over good in this world? Why does that seem to happen? Why are there good people, and why do there seem to be evil people? And if that's the case, how do you convert a good person to an evil person, or an evil person to a good person? Is that possible? So all these kind of interesting life questions start to come up. And the critical thing here is that I have to warn you that this video requires an open mind. It requires an open mind because what I'm talking about here challenges conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom on this subject is wrong. Conventional wisdom is what you get from the media, the culture, society, what you were raised to believe, what your religion told you to believe, and all of those views, generally speaking, are wrong on this issue. So I'm going to talk about why that is, all the little details, and how you can start to get your life and your mind aligned with more of the way that it actually is, rather than the way that we want it to be in some of these cartoon character versions of morality that we receive from various sources in society. Now, before we get there, we have to ask, because I'm really challenging your notions of how life is and how the world works. I'm really challenging your worldview here with some of these ideas, and I have to ask you to be able to step aside and separate yourself from your beliefs. Separate yourself from all the things that you were fed as a kid growing up, or as a young adult, or even that you've experienced in your own life. And really open your mind to some of the possibilities that are here. And the way that I'm going to do this is by asking you, have you actually yourself really looked in and investigated this question of good versus evil? Have you actually done that? See, because most people believe that they know what good and evil are. And they believe that they're very smart about this subject. But what I find is that none of them have actually gone and done a personal investigation. Now, be very careful about what this means. A personal investigation does not mean that you're simply believing what you were told when you were a kid. It does not mean that you believe whatever your society or your culture believes, or whatever people want you to believe. It means that you didn't read it in a book somewhere. You didn't hear it from somebody. You didn't see it in the news or on the television. It means that you actually sat down by yourself, unplugged yourself from all those external sources of information, and actually started to think, philosophize about what good and evil are. Maybe started doing some research on this topic, started studying it, started reading various books to look at different points of view. See, now, it's very important that you answer this question honestly, because if you've never done this, I would say 99% of people have never done this, then what is your opinion of good and evil really worth, is the question. And now it's okay if you haven't done this, but I encourage you that if you haven't done this, then keep your mind especially open, because that means that you haven't really investigated it for yourself. And I'm going to help you to do an investigation here. Now, you don't have to believe everything I tell you, but just use this as a launching point to do your own investigation And I think that if you do an honest investigation by yourself, you'll come to a lot of the same conclusions that I'm sharing with you here, that I've come to. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to do a little demonstration, because this is also a very important thing, is to get you to start to see how tricky the human mind really is. And the way I want to do that is I want to show you an image. I'm going to show you actually two images. I'm going to show one, and then after it, a few seconds later, I'm going to show a second one. And we're going to see if your interpretation of the first image changes after you saw the second image. And then you're going to come back here and we're going to discuss it. All right, so here it is. Here is the first image. Okay, awesome. Welcome back. So what did you see there? You saw two images, right? Two images. The first one of a plain wall socket. The second one of a little addition that I made to a wall socket. Now, what is the relevance of this? What does it have to do with good and evil? The wall socket's not good, it's not evil. But here's the important point. The important point is that what this is called is this is a phenomenon in human psychology that's called apophenia. What is apophenia? Apophenia is the human tendency to recognize shapes and patterns where no shapes and patterns inherently exist. Now that's what happened in this example. If you saw the first image of the wall socket and you thought that, oh, it's just a simple wall socket, but then you also saw the face in the wall socket, right? You also noticed that, even though you knew it was just a wall socket, but you also saw the human face in it. Then that was you seeing a pattern that wasn't really there. And the second image helps to highlight that. So it makes it really, really clear. It makes it like glaringly obvious what's going on there. And this is a phenomenon called apophenia. Now, what does this have to do with anything? This has to do a lot with good and evil, because what I'm going to tell you here is that good and evil are really a creation of your mind. Just that the way this pattern of the face in the wall socket isn't inherent to the wall socket. It's not that the wall socket looks like a face. It's simply that your brain has certain wiring in it that gives you image recognition, especially with human faces. The human mind, this has been proven in various psychological studies that they've done, is very, very good at image detection. Even just as a baby is able to instantly recognize simple facial patterns, even just something as basic as two dots and a little horizontal line. The human mind will immediately interpret that as a face, even though really what's going on there is you just got two dots and just a little line, but the human mind will see it as a face or a smiley face or a sad face. Now, the same is really the case with good and evil. And I really want to ask you to ask yourself this question. What is good and evil? What is the substance of it? Have you ever asked yourself that? Like, what actually is it in the world? How is it in reality? Is it like a physical object? Does it have that same kind of physicality and reality to it? Is it the same as an emotion? Is it a thought? Where does evil and where does good exist? Does it exist out there in the circumstances of everyday life, or does it exist up here in the mind? It's a very important question. Now, you might say, well, Leo, there are clear examples of evil that exist out in the world, and if we saw it, we would all recognize it, and we could point our finger at it. You might see a scene where something is happening in life, and you clearly know that that's wrong and that's evil. Like, maybe you see somebody getting murdered, and obviously that's wrong and evil. Now, the question is, okay, I agree with you on that kind of basic level, but then is the evilness of that act, where is it actually located? Is it in the person? Is it inside the person that's doing the murdering? Is it the combination, the whole scene of the murder and the victim? Where is the actual evil happening there? And what complicates this even further is then consider some other scenario where you have the same scene, one person murdering another person, killing another person, but this time it's done in self-defense. So now, it being done in self-defense, Is that act no longer evil? Most people would say it's no longer evil, but then what's the difference? Is it the physical arrangement of atoms that has changed? Is it the circumstance, the intent of the person? And where is that actually, like, physically, substantially located? Well, what you're going to find if you look at these scenarios and really dig deep and ask yourself honestly what's going on, you're going to agree that evil doesn't actually exist out there. You can't actually point a finger at evil. Evil is not a physical, tangible thing. What evil is a thought. Evil is an interpretation. Evil is a judgment that you're making on reality. And very, very simply, evil is this, and good is this. Good is simply what you prefer, and evil is simply what you don't prefer in life. That's it. There's nothing very complicated here. There's nothing very deep or metaphysical to it. Except the problem is that something even as simple as this, such a simple truth, for most people, it doesn't sit well. It doesn't resonate well. And it seems like it's not true, or that there must be something more to it. Because if that was the case, Leo, you might say, then all these sorts of problems start to come up in my worldview. And we're going to start to address those right now. But this is the general thesis that I'm throwing at you here, is that good is simply what you prefer, and evil is simply what you don't prefer. You have to be extremely intellectually honest to see this, to admit this to yourself, because there are various ego defense mechanisms at work here. There's also a lot of social conditioning at work, because you grow up in a society where you're fed with all sorts of different theories and information and different worldviews and beliefs, which are now running on a subconscious layer in your brain. So this idea that good and evil are just a personal preference, ultimately, what does that make it? That makes good and evil completely relative. It means that if your mind didn't exist, if you didn't exist, if humanity didn't exist, then there would be no good and evil in the world. This means that the world and reality itself is entirely neutral. It's devoid of any meaning. It's devoid of any good or bad characteristics. It just is. It just is. Now, this is a Buddhist concept, really. And this is a powerful concept. I love this concept. This concept is so beautiful to me, that reality is neutral. We want to believe that it's not neutral, but really if you look at it and you investigate it, then you see that it's neutral. The meanings that you're creating, those are being created in your mind, by your thoughts. The meaning doesn't exist out in the world. And this model is very beautiful to me because, first of all, it liberates us. It gives us a lot of freedom. But second of all, this freedom, it's always existed. It explains a lot. It explains a lot about how humanity works, how human beings interact with one another, why there are wars. It explains a lot of historical events, and I'm going to cover that a little bit in detail right now. So the idea here is that it exists only in your mind, any meaning, but especially something like good and evil, when you're really dichotomizing that drastically. Okay, so this being the case, you might now start to get objections, right? So here are some of your objections that I want to address. One objection that I commonly hear when someone hears this is that, well, what about things like murder and rape and theft? I mean, clearly, Leo, we don't want to say that those are neutral things. Those are clearly evil things. Don't you agree? Isn't it silly and ridiculous to have a theory of life and the world that goes against this kind of common sense notion that those things are wrong? Now, really notice what's going on there. I'm not saying that it doesn't disturb you. In fact, the fact that it disturbs you is evidence of the fact that it's a preference, right? Who is being disturbed by this? You are being disturbed by this. And that's what we're saying here, is that when you see an evil act, all that really means is that you get a tingle in your brain. Now, saying it just as a tingle, that makes it seem like it's not very substantial. But in fact, it can cause a very big impact on you. So I'm not saying that your beliefs about this don't influence you. They do. But look at what's going on in reality. It's you that's getting disturbed. It's your ego that's getting either offended, or when you see something good, it's your ego that's getting satisfied and gratified. I mean, what else is going on besides that? Is there anything else? You have to look within yourself to see if there is anything else. If you do look, and you look honestly, and you remove the social conditioning, what you're going to find is that there is nothing else. It's just thoughts. Whatever you think is evil is going to be perceived as evil. Whatever you think as being good is going to be perceived as good. Now, the next objection might go like, okay, Leo, well, even if that's the case, I mean, your theory here is very dangerous. I mean, what happens if everybody in the world believes this? What happens if everyone buys into this? Is everyone now going to believe that murder is okay and that it's just neutral, and rape is okay, it's just neutral, and theft is okay, it's just neutral? So society is going to turn into a chaotic mess. Isn't that the case? Well, let's take a look at that. It might not be quite as drastic as you might think. How about taking a pride of lions? Have you ever seen them on the Discovery Channel or some animal channel? You see a bunch of lions, maybe 10 or 20 of them, sitting in a nice little patch in the grass on the savannah somewhere. And they're just lying around and they're enjoying themselves, basking in the sun. Maybe they go off, do a little hunting, but they're just sitting there in a pride. So take this pride of lions. Now, what about a pride of lions? Would you say that a pride of lions has morality and has a concept of good and evil? Or do they not? What do you think? What would you say? I think most people would pretty readily admit that lions don't have a sense of morality. And lions don't have a good and evil. They don't understand what good and evil are. They don't even know about good and evil. That's outside their cognitive abilities. So they don't have that. But then the question is, it's kind of curious, when you have 10 lions sitting there basking in the sun next to each other, what is preventing them from tearing each other apart? From killing each other? From murdering each other? Why are they not doing that? Kind of interesting. Because your thesis is that if you get rid of my sense of morality, then the whole world goes to hell, society goes to hell. Well, yet we have this little society of lions here, and they're doing quite well. They fight sometimes, just like humans do, They scuffle, they might even bite each other, and maybe even sometimes they'll get into a fight so bad that they'll maim each other. Maybe even one of them gets killed in a fight. But generally, it's pretty clear that lions coexist very peacefully together. They generally don't have problems beyond just kind of, the normal problems that we would expect with any kind of creatures or organisms in a society who are trying to take care of themselves and look out for themselves. So that's interesting, huh? What does that mean then? That means that morality isn't quite as important as maybe you thought it was to society running and functioning well. In fact, what you're going to find is that there is no need to have a sense of black and white morality, of good and evil. There's no need to have that in order to be quote unquote good yourself. What you're going to discover is that what's really going on here is that it's not a sense of theoretical morality that's keeping you in line in society. That's not really what's going on. What's really going on is that the morality that you're exhibiting, that all of us are exhibiting, the reason we're coexisting peacefully is really because that has been hardwired into our brains, just like it is with the lions. That's what's going on with the lions, right? As part of the evolutionary process, it wouldn't work if a pride of lions came to be and evolved to that level and they were able to just indiscriminately, savagely murder each other. It wouldn't work, right? They could never evolve to that level. So what happened through the evolutionary process is that wiring was installed where they're really not allowed to harm each other, generally speaking. They have no programming, no reason to do it. So they don't. And the same thing goes on with human beings. We generally don't have reason to harm one another. The only reason we harm each other is when we're put into dire circumstances and we're really put into a zero-sum game and it has high stakes of life and death. Then we start to get physical and we start to get nasty. But otherwise, we have no reason to. And in fact, we have a lot of programming in our brain that makes us generous towards each other, that makes us friendly and makes us accommodating and empathetic. Why is that? Because that's important for a social organism of any kind. That's how society is created. That's how a society of bees works. That's how a society of ants works. They couldn't work if they were busy slaughtering each other all the time. So that's really what's going on here. It's not some sort of theoretical, lofty, religious morality that you're using. You might feel like you've got a layer of that running on you, but really that's not what's keeping you in line. It's actually a very good thing that it's not that easy to take the morality out of you. It's hardwired, so to speak, Because if it wasn't hardwired, then it would be very, very easy for you or somebody else in society to just change beliefs, and then they could easily go and start doing all these antisocial things that are damaging to the species as a whole. So it makes sense that it's really deeply hardwired. Now, in human beings, it's hardwired. Now, does that mean that it can never be unwired? No. You can see examples, for example, with suicide bombers and terrorists, where they're successfully able to unwire this because they do so much training, literally drilling the mind, the subconscious mind, so much that eventually they're able to sort of get those defenses down. But with most normal people, that's not the case. It doesn't happen. So very interesting how that works. Now, why then do people want to say that good and evil exist and that they're clear and they're external out in the real world? Why is there this need to do this? It's very interesting. This is a philosophical concept. It's called normativity. This is something that you will encounter in an ethics class, or you'll encounter it in a psychology of morality class. Normativity, what it means is it means that what I believe, you should believe. What I do, you should do. It means that your belief or your idea has a certain need to be transferred. It has a certain universality to it. So the reason that really people are interested in making these morals and values and good and evil, black and white, and objective is because when you make something objective, that means that you can now justify to others to believe that thing as well. So it's a really convenient way to transfer values. So here's how it works. If you've got a normative idea, then what happens is that you say, okay, it's out there in the real world, it's true, it's a fact of life, we all need to accept it, and now everyone looks at that and says, oh yeah, you know what, yeah, that's true, it's a real fact of life, it's out there, so all of us must accept it. And you can go around telling people, hey, you're wrong, you have to accept this. And you can tell that person, hey, look, you're wrong, look at this fact, accept it. That's normativity. Now, if you've got a concept that has no normativity, then here's how it works. Your concept has no normativity, so you tell yourself that you're believing it, okay, nice, but then you go and tell this person, hey, you should believe what I believe. You should value what I value. And that person will look at it and say, you know what, that's a nice idea, but I don't really like it. I'm going to keep believing what I believed. And you look at him and you say, well, you know what, if you want to keep believing what you believe, that's okay, because this is a non-normative concept. What's a non-normative concept? A non-normative concept or phenomenon in life is something like ice cream flavor, right? We usually wouldn't go around saying, you know what, I like chocolate ice cream, so you should like chocolate ice cream. Most people don't do that. We tend to be honest with ourselves and say, you know what, I like chocolate ice cream because I just like it. I happen to like the taste, it titillates me in a certain way. And that person, he or she likes strawberry or whatever other flavor, and that's fine with me. I don't expect everybody to like chocolate. I'm not going to come up with some sort of elaborate theory to say that chocolate is the one that everyone should like just because I like it. Now, what happens with morality is the exact opposite of that. With morality, whatever you believe, you want to make sure that everybody else believes it too, because you need it to be true. And actually, this is kind of a weakness and a crack in the system, because it already tells you that something is going wrong there. When you really strongly need to fight for something and to defend something, it usually means that it's an ego defense mechanism of a sort, because your ego needs to be validated by all the external circumstances so that it can maintain this adversarial relationship with reality. Because ultimately, when you believe that there is a good and an evil, what's happening is that you're not really being honest. You haven't really introspected enough. And so now you have to work really hard to keep that worldview into place, because you're going to see things and phenomena in the world that don't make sense to you under this model. A lot of stuff doesn't make sense when you believe that there is a good and an evil. And if you believe that good and evil are totally neutral and they don't really exist, they're just in your mind, they're personal preferences, all of a sudden everything makes sense. It's so simple, it's like, duh, why would you believe anything else? And here's some examples. If you're a student of history, then these should start ringing bells for you immediately, and stuff should just really start clicking into place when you start adopting this model. So, for example, George Bush versus bin Laden, right? Battle of the new millennium. What was going on there? Is George Bush good and bin Laden evil, or the vice versa? I mean, what was happening there? I mean, George Bush believed he was good and bin Laden was evil. What did bin Laden believe? Bin Laden believes the exact opposite of that. Now, which one of them is true? None of them are true. It just is what it is. Reality is just neutral without our layers of meaning and bullshit added on top of it. So none of them are correct or right. Now, I'm not saying that I condone the actions of bin Laden over Bush. That's not the case. You can still have preferences for what you want. Again, we're talking about preferences, right? So Bush prefers one thing, bin Laden prefers another thing, we prefer our own thing, and our own thing hopefully is in line with what Bush believes rather than what bin Laden believes. Because we don't want a world where there's a lot of terrorism and violence. But some people prefer that, and they have reasons to prefer that. Okay, we don't like it, I don't like it. Now, does that mean that I'm going to accept it? No. But it just means that it is what it is. And it's our own bullshit stories in our minds, right? There's no need to build up this grand theory of normativity. There's no need to say that, you know what, bin Laden is actually evil, and what Bush tries to espouse is actually good. There's no need to do that unless you've got some sort of insecurities within yourself. An intelligent, open-minded, intellectually honest person could say, you know what, there's no actual normativity here, but I'm still confident in what I prefer, and I prefer a life that's happy and peaceful. I prefer a society that way, and so that's just all there is to it. And I don't need anything more. That's enough. That's enough for me to go and really live my life and be motivated and still have a family and still go to work and still do everything that I want to do in my life. I don't need this elaborate theory of why someone is actually evil. I don't need to demonize anybody. Whenever you're demonizing somebody, it's generally a very big clue that you're off the track and that you're doing it for egoic reasons, not for any reason in reality. So Bush bin Laden, how about the conservatives versus the liberals? Same sort of thing. I mean, who's right? Nobody's right. Everyone has their own stories and ideas, personal preferences. What about the Israeli-Palestine conflict? Who's right there? Is there somebody that's objectively good and objectively evil? No. One side prefers one thing, another side prefers another thing. That's all there is. There's nothing more. This is actually what you find is that you find a lot of conflict in situations where this is the case. Because when you believe that everybody must believe what you believe, then you're going to be willing to go out there and fight for it. Creates a lot of tension, creates a lot of war, creates a lot of bad situations. When you have this more Buddhist type of mindset that, you know what, reality is very neutral, then actually what that does, it doesn't make you amoral. It actually makes you super moral. It's a very interesting idea because look at the way that a true Zen Buddhist, for example, or an Indian yogi, how he will behave himself. I mean, he's not out there raping and pillaging. He sees reality as totally neutral, and that actually makes him super moral. He's actually extra caring because of this, because his ego is gone. He's shed the ego, and now it's just like pure love and joy for everything that's out there. And why is that? That's just simply because the human brain was programmed with that. That's your natural state, except most of us don't feel that because we're so wrapped up in our own egos, trying to survive, trying to fight for our own security and defense. When you let those defenses go, actually you become very, very peaceful. The more you put those defenses up and the more you protect them, the more conflict you have, which is a perfect example of what's going on in the Israeli-Palestine conflicts. How about Hitler versus Churchill? What was going on there? Can we clearly say that Hitler was evil? No, it's a preference. He thought that he was doing good for the German nation. Now, do we agree with that? No. But again, that's our preference. How about Rome, the Roman Empire versus the barbarians? What was going on there? Have you studied that? Well, the Roman Empire was trying to expand and basically dominate the whole world in a similar fashion to what Hitler was doing from within Germany, except they were doing it from Rome. Now, they were collecting all these little satellite states and nations, and they were conquering various barbarian tribes and forcing them to work and to become subjects and pay taxes. Of course, the barbarians didn't want this. They thought that they were being subjugated and enslaved, so they fought back. But the Roman Empire just called them barbarians, demonized them, right? That's where we get the word barbarian from. But what's going on there? Who was right and who was wrong in that situation? Who was objectively good or evil? Nobody was. One side has its own agenda, and another side has its own agenda, and those agendas just clash. What about Rome versus Christianity? Similar kind of conflict happened there. The Roman Empire tried to crack down on Christianity, especially in the early days. And again, who was right or wrong there? Nobody, just preferences. How about capitalism, communism? Same thing. So if you go through history and you're a real student of history, you'll see that almost every conflict, every single conflict, on the social scale has happened because of this. And a lot of interpersonal conflicts happen because of this as well, because we demonize each other. And we need a way to prove to ourselves that our judgment of the other person is somehow justified. And in fact, no judgment of anybody is ever justified. There's no reason why you are right in judging somebody. So really think about this. Think about all these examples and see if this is starting to make more or less sense than the model that you may have had before. I think you'll start to see that it makes more sense. So now this case being made, what is bad about having a black and white model? What's bad about believing that good and evil are actually external facts of life? I think the problem here is, like we already mentioned in a couple of examples, is that it's an ego defense mechanism. It's a lack of intellectual honesty. It's an adversarial relationship with truth and reality. When this happens, then you tend to start to contort yourself and build your life around this, and you kind of have to put yourself in this little bubble where you're not able to accept everything that's out there. You deny things to yourself. You become judgmental of other people. You start to believe that tension and conflict are actually justified in certain circumstances. It tends to make you more extremist and less accepting of life and reality. It tends to lead to a certain closed-mindedness. It tends to lead to this effect where you're putting the blinders on in certain parts of your life, and you're isolating yourself from certain realities. And ultimately what this is doing is it's creating suffering. Because all of your suffering is being created because you have this ego, and it needs to defend itself from everything that's going on. Constantly having to defend and work and work and work. You get tired of that, you suffer, you have to concoct elaborate theories and stories about why this is the case. You have to run around and change other people. Make sure that other people believe just like you do, so that it becomes a little bit more palatable to you to believe some of the incorrect things that you believe. Because when you have a whole group of people all believing in the same wrong idea or belief, then if you're a student of history, you also know how that works. That makes it very easy for that whole group to buy into a bunch of bullshit and to bullshit each other, blow smoke up each other's asses, and basically stay comfortable in that. Why are they comfortable? Because that person is telling me that I'm right, and that person's telling me that I'm right, and I'm telling him that I'm right. So it just becomes this self-fulfilling, self-serving sort of way of life and way of being in the world. And I just find that you can't really become happy and you can't really become successful in life if you come at life from this perspective. So consider that and see where you are relative to this, and see maybe if your notions of good and evil might need a little bit of fine-tuning and tweaking. Now, if any of this stuff rubs you the wrong way, or you think that it doesn't make sense, you know what? I don't expect you to just believe it. Don't just take it. I'm just throwing out an idea here. Go ahead and take it for yourself and maybe explore it. And maybe if you find that it doesn't work for you, then toss it aside. But do an honest investigation. Be very open-minded in the way that you do this. Be very objective. Be very rigorous. Spend some time really thinking it through. And I think you might be surprised by what you find, and also how beautiful this idea is. It's not threatening at all. You'll find how beautiful it is. Okay, this is Leo. I'm signing off. This is what I have to say about good and evil. Go ahead and post me your comments down below. Please like this if you did. Click the like button right now. Share it. Throw it on Facebook, wherever you like to share videos. And then, of course, I'm going to send you to Actualized.org. Come check out my website. Sign up to my newsletter. It's a free newsletter. Amazing stuff. I'm releasing new videos, new articles every single week. I plan a lot of exclusives for you guys, for my subscribers. You want to sign up because I'm trying to bring you a really, really accurate model of how the world works. Not just accurate, but something very practical. I want to give you the mindsets and the tools that you need to go out there and live an extraordinary life. Create the kind of life that you want. Because some of these things are very subtle and they hold you back in subtle ways. If you're judgmental all the time, that's holding you back from being happy. If you're too closed-minded, that's holding you back from looking at other perspectives and seeing your own sticking points in life. These are very practical things, even though they might come off philosophical or abstract, especially in this video. So this stuff is very practical. Sign up and I'll be keeping you up to date with all the stuff I'm releasing every single week so that you're always growing yourself, you're always learning. That's what I love to do, is I love to develop myself and learn every single day, every single week of my life, and I want to help you do the same. Come and check us out.